This is Chapter 10, Lesson 1, Jacksonian Democracy. Before you play this video, I recommend that you do Thieves if you have your textbook. I want you to look through. You look for titles, headings, introduction, every first sentence, visuals, and vocabulary. Vocabulary words are highlighted. And end of reading questions, so that would be at the end of the lesson. So you want to look at these questions here. And you want to think about a summary. What is this about? Just looking at the titles, headings, introduction, every first sentence, visuals and vocabulary, and end of reading questions. Remember, these are the headings here. For example, new parties emerge, and the House chooses the president. So obviously from titles, we're going to be talking about Jackson. We'll also be talking about democracy. So Jacksonian democracy. Go ahead and pause the video, take a moment, do Thieves really briefly. You don't have to write down. You're just looking through the pages. So pause the video, and go ahead and look that over. If you go ahead and pause the video, you're ready to read through Lesson 1 of Jacksonian Democracy. So, Chapter 10, Lesson 1, Jacksonian Democracy. Andrew Jackson almost won the 1824 presidential election. In a crowded field of 4 candidates, Jackson claimed more popular votes than any other candidate, but no one won the necessary majority of votes in the Electoral College. The Constitution instructs that in such a case, the House of Representatives selects the winner. Jackson also lost this vote. 5 years later, after he had successfully won the 1828 election, Jackson wrote his opinions on the election system in his yearly letter to Congress. I consider it one of the most urgent of my duties to bring to your attention the propriety of amending that part of the Constitution which relates to the election of President and Vice President. To the people belongs the right of electing their chief magistrate. So far, therefore, as the people can with convenience speak, it is safer for them to express their own will. Under the present mode of election, a minority may often elect a president. But although no evil of this character should result from such a perversion of the first principle of our system, that the majority is to govern, it must be very certain that a president elected by a minority cannot enjoy the confidence necessary to the successful discharge of his duties. From the first annual message to Congress, December 8th, 1829. So here's a picture of Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was elected president for 2 terms after losing the 1824 election. Also, want to look at the essential question. What are the characteristics of a leader? These are more just things to think about. You do not have to write these down. We want to look at analyzing key ideas and details. Read carefully to compare political parties, their candidates, their views, and their supporters. Use a diagram like this to record what you find. Which party ran 4 candidates in the 1824 election? So I want to look at these questions. Understanding craft and structure. Determining meaning. What is meant by the term favorite son? So we're going to look at that word. And how did that term apply to the election of 1824? Number 2, determining central ideas. Based on the text under the heading Adams as President, briefly describe the course of his presidency. New parties emerge. Guiding question. What new ways of campaigning appeared during the elections of 1824 and 1828? From 1816 to 1824, the United States had only one major political party. This was the Democratic Republican Party. The party was far from united. In 1824, 4 Democratic Republican candidates competed for the presidency. Party leaders chose William H. Crawford, a former senator from Georgia, to be their candidate. 3 other candidates were favorite sons. That is, they received backing from their home states rather than the national party. Their views reflected the interest of those particular regions. 2 favorite sons, Andrew Jackson and Henry Clay, were from the West. Clay of Kentucky was Speaker of the House of Representatives. Jackson of Tennessee was a hero of the War of 1812. Raised in poverty, he claimed to speak for Americans who had been left out of politics. The 3rd favorite son, John Quincy Adams of Massachusetts, was the son of was the son of former President John Adams. He was popular with merchants and business people in the Northeast. The House chooses the president. In the election, Jackson received a plurality of the popular vote, the largest share. No candidate received a majority, or more than half, of the electoral votes. The Constitution requires that the House of Representatives select the president when no candidate has won a majority of the electoral vote. As the House prepared to vote, Clay met with Adams. Clay agreed to use his influence as Speaker to defeat Jackson. With Clay's help, the House chose Adams for president. Adams quickly named Clay to be Secretary of State. In the past, this office had been the stepping stone to the presidency. Jackson's followers accused the two men of making a corrupt bargain and stealing the election. So let's take a moment. We're going to look at the maps on here. Here we have the election of 1824. Over here, the election of 1828. So we can look at the what the different colors mean. Make this bigger. Let's look at the key, the legend. It tells us what each of these colors represent. So in red, we see Adams. He was running for the Democratic Republican Party. Jackson, also from the Democratic Republican Party, so he was blue. Crawford, this purple color, also for Democratic Republican. Clay, this orange color, also from the Democratic Republican Party. Now, the stripes represent mixed, so that means people voted for a bunch of them. Now, if you look, also on the asterisks, the stars, it tells you how they were split. How many people voted for Adams, how many people voted for Jackson. So the electoral vote, remember each state, they vote by state, they get a certain number of electoral votes. The more people, the more electoral votes they have. So it's like the points. So there was 261 points, and Jackson got 99, but he needed half, more than half. He needed a majority. So he didn't have a majority. He only had 37.9%. Adams had even less, with 32.2%. The House of Representatives vote, so whenever there's no majority here, it goes to the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives voted for Adams. Remember, Adams is red. So they gave him 54.2% of the vote. Now for the whole country, out of the total votes counted, 356,038 people voted in the election. 43.13% voted for blue. Remember, blue is Jackson. So Jackson didn't have a majority because this is less than 50%. But he had the plurality, which means that he had more than anyone else. So let's take a look at these questions here. The election of 1824 produced great controversy. Patterns in movement. Where did the candidate who won the most electoral votes finish in the House vote? Explore region. On what basis might Jackson have expected to win the presidency? So we're going to take a look over here. Determining meaning. Define the term mudslinging in your own words. How does the image created by this word add to its meaning? So we're going to read these two sections here. Adams as president. Adams and Clay denied any wrongdoing. No one ever uncovered any evidence of a bargain. Still, the charge cast a shadow over Adams' presidency. In his first message to Congress, Adams announced his plans. In addition to improving roads and waterways, he wanted to build a national university and support scientific research. Adams' proposals upset his opponents. They wanted a more limited role for the federal government. It would be wrong, they believed, for government to spend money on such projects. Congress finally approved funds for improving rivers, harbors, and roads, but this was far less than Adams wanted. The election of 1828. By 1828, the Democratic-Republican Party had split. Jackson's supporters called themselves Democrats. The National Republicans supported Adams. Most Democrats favored states' rights and distrusted strong central government. The National Republicans wanted a strong central government. They supported measures such as building roads and a national bank to facilitate economic growth. During the campaign, both sides resorted to mudslinging, or attempts to ruin their opponent's reputation with insults. The candidates also used slogans, buttons, and rallies. Such practices became a regular part of the American political life. In the election, Jackson received most of the votes cast in the frontier states. He also received many votes in the South, where his support for states' rights was popular. John C. Calhoun of South Carolina, who had been Adams' vice president, switched parties to run with Jackson. Calhoun also supported states' rights. Jackson won the election easily. Shortly after the election, Jackson's supporters officially formed the Democratic Party. Checking for understanding. I want you guys to think about these questions. Number 1, explaining issues. Why was the House of Representatives required to decide the 1824 presidential election? What was the outcome? Number 2, summarizing. What practices of the 1820 election are still used today? We're also going to look at this map. Let's look at the questions. Andrew Jackson won the election of 1828. Number 1, patterns and movement. How many more electoral votes did Jackson get than he needed to win the election? Number 2, exploring region. How did having only 2 presidential candidates in 1828 affect the results of this election? So let's take a look at the map. So again, using the key, we see Jackson is blue, and now he's part of the Democratic Party. Adams, National Republican, he is red. So blue, that means Jackson. He had 68.2% of the electoral vote. For the popular vote, he had 56.03%. You can see these are the states in blue are the states that Jackson won, and the states in red are the states that Adams won. And then mixed, so they both got votes. You can see for the asterisks, for example, Maryland was mixed. 6 votes for Adams and 5 for Jackson. So you can look at, again, how the election of 1828 was different than the election of 1824.